Welcome to Coffee and Philosophy, Episode 2. Let me know if you can hear me in chat.
Yep, it's going through.
Okay, looks like we're good to go. I'm going to be joined by MenO today. I think you just heard him. Tell everybody hello, MenO.
What is up? What is up? We're going to talk about coffee today. We're going to leave the philosophy for later. But today it's just about the coffee.
Oh man, we got good coffee here. In New Orleans, we're known for coffee and chicory. I don't know if you've heard of chicory, but basically, my understanding is back when coffee was basically like too much of a luxury to really be able to afford, they started like mixing in chicory to make it last longer. But like the people down here just got so used to it and liked it so much that we kept it. So it's like a New Orleans thing.
Oh, yeah? That's kind of funny. There's an episode of NPR that I listened to recently, and it's funny enough that I'm going to do this because I said we're going to talk about coffee, and then we're going to talk about philosophy. But this really awesome episode of NPR, I'm going to try to find it so I can send it to you, about this guy who came from a long family tradition of coffee. I guess farmers, I guess you could say, from somewhere in the Middle East. It's escaping me right now. And the dude had no idea of his lineage. He had no idea what his ancestors did. And then one day, I guess he was like really broke, had like a terrible economic situation in front of him, and he was walking some sort of hallway or like a corridor or whatever. He ended up going into a part of a city that he had never seen before, and he saw this like little statue of a coffee maker from the Middle East. And he looks at the statue, even though he had seen him before. He never paid attention to it until that particular day. And we looked at the statue. I guess the name of the statue was somebody from his family, like an ancestor, like an ancestor of his family. And after that, he went on this quest to learn about coffee, and ended up going back home to where his granddad was born, and learning of the tradition and all this stuff. And it's really a crazy story, because the dude started as a complete new millennial ignorant guy, that was working as not even a barista, like he was doing something of the sort. I can't remember right now, but to like all of a sudden being like an authority in coffee within a year. It's a pretty cool story.
Millennials.
I definitely just heard Anka.
Yeah, that was Anka.
Oh, man, it's crazy because I got into coffee whenever I stopped drinking soda so much, and coffee's got such a higher water content in it. It's not as bad for you from what I guess like from the health perspective, but like whenever I started really getting into coffee, that's whenever I started learning about like the different stuff, like how in New Orleans like we use chicory, things like that. But I got my first French press, and man, like if you ever use French press to make coffee, it's just like there's no going back.
No, I've never done it. You're gonna have to show me I don't even know what you're talking about. Is this some sort of grinder? When you say press it, like it kind of destroys the beans?
So hold on one second. Toriko is saying she can't hear anything, but I can see that she has herself muted, like her.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
that would make it complicated. Yeah.
But a French press is basically like, imagine, like a simple way to describe it would be like there's a glass beaker, and you fill it up with like water that's basically just shy of boiling, and then you put you put in your coffee like straight into the water, just like if you were like putting tea, like loose tea or something in there without a bag. And then on top of that, you take it's like a filter. Basically, it's like a metal grate. Looks kind of like you know how like a needle works, where there's like a syringe and a plunger.
Yeah, yeah.
So basically, like if you imagine that, like this metal will like fit the beaker basically, and whenever you're
Hmm.
pushing it down, it's gonna force the water through tiny little holes, and it's going to collect all the grinds at the bottom. So like what happens whenever you do this is you mix up the coffee like into the water and let it sit, let it marinate a little bit.
Yeah.
Usually like I leave it for a couple of minutes, and whenever you make coffee, like have you ever noticed like if you get really good like really fresh coffee, there'll be like a layer of like almost like oil, like a little shine to it.
Yeah, whatever that is. Yeah, it has to be fat from the bean. It is a bean after all.
Right, right. So whenever
Hmm.
you use a French press, it saves all of that, so you get like all of the flavor, and it's just like the perfect way to drink coffee as far as I'm concerned.
Oh well, I'm gonna have to look into that. Obviously, I'm a heavy coffee drinker. By That's not an exaggeration. I probably drink like 7 or 8 cups a day. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I don't put sugar or milk in my defense. I just drink coffee, straight black.
Oh, dude, you'd love French press then, man. You should definitely try it. They're cheap. Like I think you can get a cheap French press for like $10.
Oh yeah, all right.
Okay, now that's two people saying they have no sound. Why can Maddie not hear?
She might have to connect and disconnect. Because Tariko just responded to what I just said, so I know she
Yeah,
can hear.
so I know we're broadcasting. It's just interesting.
Yeah,
It looks like Jesse's here, Lion's here, Maddie's here, and Toriko, and some weird clown guys watching. Whatever.
yeah. I don't know. I'll flag him later.
Yeah, just for humility, though, right?
Yeah. Um, it's it's a service I provide.
Okay, so today we were gonna. I know we kind of like went over it a little bit. We wanted to talk about some of the concepts of like jealousy and envy, and like where's that come from? What, like what is it really about?
Yeah. I mean, even though the next show is probably gonna bleed into this idea, so some of the conversations that we're gonna have, they're gonna bleed into the next show because these are emotions we're talking about. I think it's a great discussion to have because they're unavoidable, and if they not reign our human interactions, without a doubt, they do take up a lot of our time, and we can be in both ends of those scenarios. We can be the one feeling some sort of jealousy or envy towards somebody else, or the one receiving it. And and of course, as much as all of us have the ability to flex a little bit of the empathic muscles that our brain may have, none of us know exactly how to deal with it when we encounter it, regardless of what position you're in. Every single time, it can get pretty complicated. So when I suggested this topic to you was because a lot of things that happen on Steam, really, and the people that participate of the platform struggle with it, and it seems kind of ironic because we're supposed to be a meritocracy. We're supposed to be a place where you achieve what you achieve depending on the amount of effort that you put into things. But there's a lot of entitlement, and with that, unfortunately, with that comes a lot of jealousy and a lot of envy. So I wanted to get your thoughts on what you thought about these particular emotions and what people do and when they don't do the things that they say, the things they get angry about.
It's funny. Well, I think the first thing we have to accept about Steam is it's not fair. It's not going to be fair, and I think we have to get past that. But it's kind of funny because like one of the first, I guess like whenever I started really like getting into my philosophy area on Steam, when I started writing about philosophy a lot, one of the
Hmm.
things like I asked people about, I was like, I don't really get jealousy all that much. Like I don't really. It was like one of the things that like it took me a while to really grasp because it's not something like I could really resonate with a lot. Like I don't really care about money all that much. So like whenever I started really thinking about it and realizing like all the different ways that we get jealous and we envy others, I mean, I can see things like even like whenever we want to say have more steam power or something like that because we want to do more with it, even if it's not for like a personal benefit, that's still envy. Like we're still wanting someone else's power, even if we're just going to use it to basically give it away or redistribute wealth, things like that. That is still envy, even if we don't necessarily see it as like a personal gain type of situation. We're still wanting something someone else has. And I think, like at the end of the day, it's really coming from a point of comparing ourselves to others and feeling like we in some way lack something. So, like that's kind of how I look at it and how I try to approach it whenever I work through it.
Well, no doubt. I at least for me, what personal benefit is something that that all of us have to think about and try to define it, because it is, no pun intended, so personal, or not to be redundant, in the sense that you're saying, okay, if you're the type of person that likes to be altruistic, if you're the type of person that likes to have more so that you can give more, you could make the argument that that emotion or that desire, that want, comes from a selfish mentality or from a selfless mentality, and both could be equally valid because both could be defended in one way or another. Like I think I said a long time ago, maybe even to you, that some people, and I see Agro like one of them. Some people like to have this idea of giving, 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 because it makes them feel good, and in that sense, the act of giving, it's could be interpreted as selfish act, because it's almost like, yeah, I'm doing it for me. um I don't know if you read the book, or if you even entertained the idea of reading it, of The Selfless Gene, where it talks about a lot of things that we do in life, a lot of things that, as a species, are not really, they can be construed as altruistic. They can be interpreted as like, oh, a mother orangutan did that because she's selfless, because of the love of the child. Where, or we can analyze it like it's just the desire for genes to survive, and in that sense, it seems like a selfish act. So, and I know this is to say that envy maybe just plays a role as a piece of this complicated puzzle, which is to evoke some sort of desire for things that we possibly need in order to achieve goals. Because um, to just label it and say, "Oh, envy is a bad thing. Envy is a terrible thing to have," might also have the consequence of us being zombies and not ever desiring to grow, not ever desiring to improve. So,
Well, I
um,
mean, the way I kind of think about it is like everything exists as a sort of paradox of itself. Like it's entirely possible to be selfish for selfless reasons. It's entirely possible to be greedy for altruistic reasons. And
yeah,
I mean, I think one thing that, like I really try to focus on myself is realizing that everything is perspective. And just because I see one thing as the right way, it doesn't mean that it's right to everyone else. So, like, whenever I think, altruism is the way we should all be able to share and, kind of like work together. Like, I'm a community minded person. I think we all succeed together. I can fully accept that that's my perspective. And to other people, altruism is a dirty, dirty word. Like a lot of people think of altruism kind of like the way I think of pity. Like I think pity and charity are kind of like opposite sides of the same coin, and I think both of them kind of require in some aspect us making a judgment on another. So like whenever we pity someone, we're kind of like looking down on them and feeling sorry for them. When we charity someone or give them charity, we're kind of like judging that in some way we're better off and they're worse off than us. But I think compassion is that happy middle ground where if we can just realize that life isn't fair, and we always have to kind of be mindful of different circumstances and realize that maybe like everything we go through is feels it's always going to be personal to us, and it's going to always feel really like it's bad when it's happening and everything. But I mean, if you compare and put things into perspective and realize everybody goes through shit, like it doesn't matter how rich you are, how poor you are. Like everybody has different levels of suffering, and that suffering never goes away. Like
Yeah.
there's no human that ever lives without having some form of suffering.
Well, it's not only a contrast to good times, it's almost necessary for growth. I mean, how would you know if you're making a mistake if it's not painful?
I definitely agree with that. It's it's not like people go out and want to suffer. It's not like people, and on the other side, I think some people, they kind of like get in this mindset, realize that if you're gonna suffer one way or another, you might as well basically not necessarily pick how you suffer, but suffer in a way that benefits you and helps you achieve your goals, right? Like, say, like if you wanted to work on fitness, then working out and fasting, things like that would be your way of suffering to get what you want. Or if you
Yeah.
wanted to be, like super smart and you wanted to go to college and become like some kind of PhD doctor or whatever, then you would suffer through the school and learning and yeah, I mean, there's going to be other like unplanned ways of suffering that come up along the way, and I mean, you have to deal with those too. But it seems like if we kind of accept that suffering is an inherent part of the human experience, and we gear it to benefit us, that we can kind of make it beneficial. And that's one of the ways I think of, like alchemy, using negative energy and negative experiences to basically transmute and give me what I want in the end.
I like that way of looking at it. I guess, and you're using the word suffering, and because it is, I mean, you're using the word suffering as some sort of uncomfortable situation or pain. And of course, like when you work out, you experience a lot of pain, a lot of your muscles ache. So it is pain, it is suffering, but there's an ultimate goal to be achieved. Therefore, it's almost as if you decide the cost of what it is that you're doing. Is far less than the gains of what you will accomplish if you do what you do. So, um, without a doubt, like everything that we do in life can be, not to say that it can be simplified like this because it's not so defined and it's so personal, but it can be put into some sort of T, and you put the pros and the cons, and you just say to yourself, "Oh, is this worth paying the cost for it? Is it worth the suffering that I'm about to endure, or is it not? And if it's not, are we smart enough, emotionally balanced enough to make the decision to, um, get away from that situation, eliminate that person from our life, um, quit the job, whatever it is, because the suffering, the cost slash the suffering is not worth the benefit that we are getting. And this also goes back to envy because I guess you could interpret envy the same way. You could say envy could be a cost as well. Could be a cost of that you need to be able to pay. You need to be able to experience in order for you to evoke feelings of improvement or not feeling desire of improvement. So that if I look at somebody who's doing a lot better than me, and I feel absolutely no envy, and I'm not talking about toxic envy. I'm not talking about me grabbing a stick and putting it in the spokes of somebody else's bike. I'm talking about me looking at somebody and saying, what does that person have, tools wise, intelligence, resources that I don't, and how can I achieve that if that is what I want? In that sense, maybe envy is necessary. It's a necessary suffering that we need to have, and I'm using the word kind of almost dramatically, so that we can improve and we just don't float with the current.
I got a great, I guess like a pretty good example of this. I just want to say, it looks like Tannish joined us, so I wanted to, say hey to him. And
Hey, Tanish.
and Lion, you're always gonna be Lion to me, okay? Even if you are Leon, but you gotta be iron like a lion in Zion. So,
Yeah. You know, what you should do. You should put like the spell Leon like you would spell Bruce Lee, like Lee, Lee, then space, and then EON, and then nobody will get it wrong.
and looks like Krim made it. I had the chance to, yeah, you were there. So me and Mino both had the chance to meet Krim, and all I will say is she is equally fabulous in person as she is
Yes,
online. So,
I agree.
okay, so,
I
uh,
will never call her by her name, though. I think I told her that she will never be her name. She would always be the Crim.
oh yeah, I called her Krim the whole time too. I was like,
Yeah, me too. I'm like, I'm not calling you by your name. Well, it's weird. I don't like it. It doesn't compute.
so like what you were talking about with like the whole job thing. So some people that have been, I guess, like have known me a while on Steemit and things like that will know that this month makes a year for me doing Steemit full time as like a career choice. I guess if you want to call it that. This is what I do for money now, and obviously, like whenever we're talking about suffering, I can look at where I was before, and I was, pretty comfortable financially. I had good insurance. I was working a job that I guess, like most people would say, is like a good career focus, security. But what it came down to for me is all of that worth not being happy? Like if you like to me that is the worst suffering. Suffering for the illusion of security and being afraid to live the life you really want to me is just like honestly I'll just spell it out for you. Like I was extremely suicidal. I hated every day I would wake up and I was just like I don't want to go to work. I mean there were days where I would just think about like if I just drove off the interstate into a tree instead of actually going to work this morning, I think it would be an improvement in my life. And like when I think like if you get to that point and you can really assess that like you're so unhappy with your life that you would literally consider killing yourself instead of keep on living it, that that's the time to really
Make a change.
drastically change some stuff, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So basically, it came down to the point where I was just. I mean, you basically have to hit rock bottom and hit that just complete fuck it point. Like, where even if I end up homeless, I'm going to be doing what I want to do and living the kind of life that I want to live. I don't care if I'm poor. I don't care if I'm homeless. Like, I don't. I would rather live free for as long as possible doing what I want to do and just having some faith in the universe that there's a shot that this can work out instead of keep doing something I don't want to do and living in spite of myself.
I have to say I agree with that mentality. I don't know if I told you this, Clay, but there was a time in my life where I was homeless. Like I made some choices. I ended up a lot of people when they turn 18 years old, a lot, especially boys, they decide, okay, it's time to leave. And I didn't leave the house. I left the country. And because of pride, maybe mainly because of pride, I had a really hard time telling my family that I was going through a lot. And the band that I came in singing with, that the manager of the band turned out to be kind of crazy. I ended up living in the streets. I ended up having days without food. I ended up one day chasing a bunny. I know Tariko might get upset, but I chased a bunny because I hadn't eaten for 3 days and I was really hungry. And I quickly learned that there's no way a human being could ever catch a bunny. Uh, so I've hit that rock bottom, the what you're talking about. I think sometimes I need to remind myself that being poor has very little to do with having money. I mean, in the real sense, in a sense that matters, because at the end of the day, when we die, um, we take nothing to the grave. We become dust yet again, and there is nothing to gain out of protecting some sort of pride on this idea, or our ego on this whole idea of the man or the guy or the girl, what choose that you're supposed to be. The one that is supposed to follow the rules, the one that is supposed to be a good citizen, the one whatever it is that the society has deemed to be a good citizen. There's no, or a strong man. Like, I think guys, and I say this as a dude, I don't know, I can't speak for girls, but I think guys, we have this concept that has been given to us, maybe through our parents. In my case, I have to say that's why, through my dad, that if you're a man, you're supposed to be tough, you're supposed to never cry, you're supposed to work your ass off and pull yourself by the bootstraps, and all that is fine and dandy. But the part that is missing from that particular teaching, or at least it was for me, is that the definition or the concept of what success meant is such a personal thing that it really has nothing to do with the amount of money that you can be making. Exactly what you were saying earlier, because I was also that dude. I was also that dude in some point in time, especially after I was poor, that I worked my ass off. And I used to do manage restaurants. I used to do regional trainings. I would spend one time. It is no joke. I actually kept the check stub, some sort of trophy of my stupidity, so I would not forget what it means to lose yourself. And in a 2 week period, I had 178 hours of work put into, which is ridiculous. That means that I never went home. I actually remember going to my car, sleeping for 40 minutes, and going right back in. Um, and I had all these emotions that you're describing as well. I remember thinking, oh, well, you know what? If I don't wake up tomorrow, that's gonna be fine and dandy, because who fucking cares? And all of a sudden you realize that in this world that you've created for yourself, seeking some sort of concept, some sort of idea of what success is supposed to mean, you start to lose what it is that you were supposed to be doing yourself. The one kid that is supposed to reside within you, the one kid is that had these ideas of things they wanted to do. If you wanted to be a musician, if you wanted to be a singer, whatever it is that you wanted to do, a painter, that guy, you've managed to put a gag on him. He's shut the hell up finally. And then all of a sudden you picked up some sort of mold. You say, okay, this is the person I'm supposed to be. You put that mask on yourself and you go for it. And then if you do that long enough, then you stray away, and then you have such a hard time remembering who you are. And so I remember hitting that rock bottom, and I'm with you 100%. And to whoever is feeling like that, like, oh, of this idea of like, oh, I don't, I rather be me and have less in the bank than be somebody I'm not, but have all this money in the bank. You're I would say you're not wrong about doubting if that's right or wrong, but I think you're making the right choice for whatever it means, because we take nothing to the fucking grave, and we only get one shot, and we don't know how long we're gonna last. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna be here 2 years from now, 3 years from now. You don't know that either. And if I can enjoy 2 or 3 years with friends, if I can enjoy it with a woman I love, if I can enjoy that, that's a win. So this fake idea of security, this of that, oh, I'm gonna do it the way the 9 to 5, blah blah. It's like it's bullshit in so many ways, because it's like, I think I've said this to you before, Playa. It's like at the end of your life, when it's time to go, when you're laying in bed, when you're 2 or 3 breaths away from your last breath, there's nobody that comes with a trophy and says, all these things you wanted to do and you didn't do them because you were being the guy you're supposed to be. You were being strong. You were being the man. Here you go. Here's a fucking trophy. Nobody does that. Nobody gives you shit. So, like, why would I hold on to the things I want to do? Why would I hold on to, traveling if I want to travel? Backpacking if I want to backpack? If no, I'm not getting a trophy if I don't. So I'm with you 100%. I resonate with what you say so much, because it's almost like, in that sense, maybe that's why we're friends, because we recognize in each other those things, even though we haven't talked about this too much.
Right. I just wanna say, I see, we've got Steve and Soundwaves joined us. Julia joined us. Hey, everybody. This is the second official episode of Coffee and Philosophy on MSP Waves. We do appreciate all of you coming out. I'm talking with MenO today. We're kind of going over some. With philosophy, we always branch out. So, like, the core topic we're talking about is envy and jealousy, but we're kind of, going from there. What you were saying, Mito, this is one of those things that I think all of us struggle with at some point is, we have the idea of what we think we're supposed to be and what we think we're supposed to do. That comes from, like society, our family, learned behaviors. We have all the reasons why we think we have to do something a certain way, Uh, like, I mean, this goes for jobs, this goes for things like marriage. I mean, I feel like I'm pretty fortunate that I never had like any kind of major issues with my own sexuality. But I mean, like I've had a lot of friends that have, and whenever like I just think about the stuff that goes on in society and how we're so geared to where you have to do things a certain way, and like it feels like there's so much expectations put on people to basically be another cog in the machine, be another brick in the wall. You got to go out and you got to make money to spend money. You got to, get married, have kids, just basically be a part of the endless machine. And I feel like at some point we like for some people that works. For some people, they can be happy doing that. And, I'm completely fine if that's how you enjoy living your life and that's how you enjoy spending your time. But for me, that never worked. I could never be happy doing that. I don't believe in the concept of marriage as like I think society does it. I feel like society puts the concept of marriage as in almost like property, like you own another person. And like I don't see women that way, and I don't think. I mean, I could never be in a relationship with someone that viewed me as like their property. And like whenever you look at jobs kind of like view you as their property too. Like you're their manager or you're their whatever. You do like their foreman or like you're their guy that mixes the cement. Like if you go somewhere else and start, mixing cement for a different company, they're gonna be like, "What are you doing, man? Get back over here. You're supposed to be mixing our cement." But it doesn't matter what we do. There seems like there's always this competitive, dominating mindset in the way society works, where it feels like people always are trying to own other people, and that just doesn't resonate with me at all. Like, I'd much rather see everybody be free and everybody be able to, find their own way and do things that they like to do. And I really feel like that's the only way to actually get any kind of satisfaction out of life is to do the things you want to do for the reasons that you want to do them. And whenever you're doing things for the idea that you have to do them a certain way or that you have to like earn money because you're expected to be something that you don't want to be. I don't feel like there's ever any happiness in that.
I agree 100%. Speaking of collaboration and why humans, or at least uh, they used to be able to collaborate so well. Uh, this is going to sound like a digression, right? But it's not. So like here, give me a couple minutes to explain. Yeah, there's actually a really interesting TED talk that talks about shoes, talks about running without shoes, right? And the reason for the TED talk is because as humanity has progressed and we invented the shoe and we got a little complicated, all of a sudden all these new problems started to happen, knees, backs, all this stuff going out. And the guy who's doing the speech is talking about how there's a particular tribe in somewhere in Mexico. I don't remember exactly where it is. They can run barefoot for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and these are like 80-something-year-old people running without an issue. And they'll do the equivalent of 20 marathons in one go. So they don't stop. You know what I mean? And they're like in their 70s, 80s. And he's talking about how obviously this is mainly about the shoe, but he's talking about theories as to why we are able to do this, and talks about how humans have the ability to sweat, and because we have the ability to sweat, we can cool ourselves even though it's a really hot day and all this stuff. But it's also talking about maybe the evolutionary reason for us developing this ability, for us being able to run for so long, and then this leads to why this connects to the conversation we're having, which is the the ability for humans to collaborate, because it would be impossible for humans, and I'm talking about not currently obviously, but 20,000 years ago, for us to be able to hunt down an animal with our strength. You know, a freaking a small monkey is stronger than us. A small bovine is way stronger than us. So to think that we were able to thrive as superhumans would be to not understand at all human physiology. And so the only way we hunted, or for sure, because we've been eating meat for a very long time before we even started to make tools, was through our ability to collaborate, through our ability to work together. And if we collaborated, if we worked together, that meant that we hunted as a pack. That meant that the whole pack went out there and ran for hours and hours, maybe days, uh, like after a prey. And the pack was not only men; it was men of different ages. They were women. They were also children, because it makes no sense that it would be only men. And if women are pregnant, they would have to be with the pack in order for them to eat, to get the nutrition, to be able to feed their children. The children were there to learn from the grown-ups, and the older people of the pack, the wise ones, would be the one to know more or less how the animals were going to react. And and if you could grab all this crazy interaction that was happening, and you can grab this whole phenomena of evolution that might have been the case for thousands of years, and wrap it up really with something extremely basic, an extreme basic version of altruism, which is what you were talking about earlier about collaboration. Because at that point in time, I'm sure uh, the everything happened just because it served the purpose for the improvement of the tribe, and not so much because it was some sort of economical transaction happening. I doubt that at that point in time there was something like, well, I'll give you 2 corns if you run the left flank for me for 3 days. It was just in the sake of what's better for the group, what's better for the community. Um, Now, I think there is some vestiges of whatever that is left within us, because as we were talking earlier, um, there is benefits, like emotional benefits, for somebody who decides to be altruistic. And I'm not, and again, it's almost what you're talking about. It's not really about giving people handouts just because you want to undermine their ability to be somebody, or feeling pity for people, because that's also, can be construed as negative. I don't think any of us like when somebody feels pity for us. At least not a healthy person. Some wouldn't a healthy person wouldn't like that. But what I'm talking about more is our ability, maybe genetic wise, the information is genetic, to find ways to collaborate with each other to be effective, to achieve goals. And goals, in the case of back then, it was hunting an animal that's 100 times bigger and 100 times stronger. I'm exaggerating, but than a human. And right now, due to the complexity of society, it could be, whatever it is that we're tackling, resource scarcity of resources, uh, shelter, whatever it is. I think maybe the satisfaction from it comes from uh, that's when you're hunting, comes from some sort of ancient genetic information, and which is why I believe that communities are amazing. I mean, they can achieve anything, because if we think about, for us, it's almost unthinkable to imagine all of us getting together and hunting down a bull that is a couple of tons, working together to do so. But then again, you know, none of us are fit. It's a whole different time. But right now we look at other things, right, and that are in the future, things that we want to tackle as society, and we think it's the new bull. It's a new giant thing that we have a hard time imagining that we can accomplish. But then again, we haven't figured out how to work as as that tribe yet, as this new type of tribe, which is really, in a very complex way, what we are.
Well, I think we have to look at the way society's changed. Basically, we have time divided into there's the old tribal mentality, there's the working together as a collective like little group of community, where they would go out and the community basically provides for itself, and the everything's pretty much got to be community minded. If there's like a medicine man or a shaman or a healer, whatever you want to call them, they are for the group. It's not like they charge people for their service. Basically, the group provided food and they would do their service. And I mean, it's the same way with like people that made clothes, or like the people making
Yeah.
spears, right? So we look from that form of society as like a collective, larger family type. I mean, it's almost hard to grasp anymore because we've never known anything like that, and I feel like that's kind of like what we try to do with MSP in some ways. We're trying to build a more tribal, collaborative group of people, and it really takes a certain mindset. But if you look at like where society shifted, basically, we started getting kings and rulers, and even if you want to like call them presidents or prime ministers, basically the whole idea of government is kind of shaped around the idea of telling people. I'm trying to think of how to word this right. It's basically based on manipulating people's fears and telling them that you can provide more security than they could get in another way. So like if you're saying, okay, well, all these little tribes exist and we're going to collect them up and turn them into some big group and make it like a country, right? Well, how do we convince these tribes that they have to go into these larger groups and start, specializing? And this is where money comes in. Like you're going to have every shaman or whatever, every medicine man kind of start grouping together into their own little collective. So they're no longer part of the tribe, they're now part of the people that do medicine. And sure, medicine progresses and things change, but now they have to have some way to trade and barter for their food. Or, like the people that make clothes, it's the same situation. So basically, the government tells you, here, we're going to give you these mediums of exchange, which are what we think of nowadays as like dollars or euros or whatever. But I mean, at some point, it was like literally gold or silver or seashells, whatever their token of exchange is. It has to be something scarce enough that people can't just go out and easily duplicate it or make more. And the whole idea is that the central authority keeps things fair and keeps them in check, and it provides security as long as you're doing your thing, your job, whatever your task is, that you have security because you're going to have mediums of exchange to give for the things you need. And the people that are out hunting, they basically sell their food for these mediums of exchange. And whenever they need a doctor, they'll be able to go and get their doctor services. So essentially, the only thing that really got added in is now you have tokens that are whatever, dollars, seashells, whatever you want it to be, as your medium of exchange going between the different groups of people. And you now have some central authority saying that they're providing you security by being the regulatory force, and that they're supposed to keep everything working and fair. But what we can obviously see is that that doesn't happen because over time, more people want to do certain things. You know, there's more people that want to be a doctor, or there's more people that want to go out and hunt for the food, or there's more people that want to build a warehouse and, you know, build planes or whatever people want to do, right? So there creates like a major imbalance whenever it comes to wealth. And while I don't think that's necessarily a negative thing, what happens is it's so disproportionate that the things that we need can end up becoming not not as rewarding as they probably should be. You know, like if we look at people growing food, everybody has to eat to live. So why would that not be one of the most well paying jobs? You know, if people stop growing food, what are we all going to do? I mean, I'm assuming we all starve, right? If there's nobody to grow food, nobody to gather food, and then what's the point of building planes if we have no people to, you know, put in them because nobody's eating? It just seems like society is built around this idea of some kind of security and stability that doesn't really exist. And there's something, you know, only humans do this. Like, I don't really know what it is in the human mind that allows us to be so manipulated by fear that we can basically sell our lives for the idea that we are getting rid of some of the risk inherent in life. But obviously, if we look throughout history, this happens. So we don't have people just doing what they want to do anymore. We have people going into specializations that we think will make us more secure than other specializations. And you have people working at McDonald's that really want to just, you know, paint, or you have people working construction that would really rather be drawing housing plans or, you know, something like that. It's just society as a whole seems like it offers all this security and offers all these new chances, but what it really does is just creates a machine that essentially feeds itself, and taxation is like a prime example of that. If you look at taxation and how it basically just goes to continue feeding the government, and the government just creates more and more ways to spend money and more taxation, then in the end, it's just like a self perpetuating system that gets worse and worse over time, and there's no real. I don't really see the value in it personally, but I mean, I realize that's my perspective, and some people enjoy it, so I have to always be mindful of that.
Yeah, this makes me think of so many things. I'm like writing some stuff down because you're touching on so many subjects that I feel very passionate about.
Well, I mean, I
Like,
feel like they all tie in together, right?
yeah, they do. They do. Ron keeps talking about government. Every single conversation of freedom, free speech, it becomes about government and stuff. And I was I was watching a video of one of the fourth horseman, Dan. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. But anyways, I don't want to go to that topic too much. But there's a video where he talks about memes, the creation of memes, and I'm not talking about D-Mania. I'm talking about like real life memes and how certain ideas kind of take a life on their own, and they start off like some sort of rumor, some sort of concept that of one person, but somehow, some way that meme has the ability to incept itself into people's minds, and it gains momentum and all, and then it becomes a belief, and it can grow to a belief system, eventually becoming a religion. And I wonder if government is just the biggest meme of all, in a sense that it, at some point in time, some sort of leader of some sort of tribe said to their people, in fear of losing his position of power, that the god snake had spoken to him and he made it up. and that he was the one that was gonna guide them through a terrible time and all the stuff. And the story that evoked a lot of fears among the people uh, started to gain momentum, and then all of a sudden, the generations to come were the ones that started to have that inert necessity, or like it not inert, that's not the word I'm looking for, like it's incepted necessity to have a strong leader. And if you multiply that to the nth power, it becomes eventually a government. Because one thing that Ron keeps on talking about, and I agree with him 100% on this particular thing, is that there's a demand for it. So we can talk about how much the government is corrupt and how much everything that they do is in their own benefit, and how much we would not like them to exist. Um, but it's almost irrelevant, my opinion, on the subject, because if people keep on saying no, but we want government, and I'm not saying you specifically, because I think you and me agree. Like, there's a lot of stuff that they do that is bullshit. I don't like the idea that we spend so much money in wars, for example, bombing countries that have nothing to do with us. But if there's a demand for it, if people are so attached to their fear of what would happen to them if the government didn't exist, then the only way that this meme that became a government one day can be defeated is if another meme takes over, which is a meme of no government. The idea that we can do it if we have more of a simplistic gift economy. If the idea of cryptocurrencies to can really take off one day, and so yeah, taxation is theft. Yeah, but unless everybody agrees on that, that is just an opinion, and 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 I'm not saying that's not valid, but unless most people agree, it's just an opinion because it's perception. So um now speaking of so I wrote that down, and the second thing I was writing about that I wrote is the necessity to struggle, because here's the thing, Clay, that I may be completely wrong about this. I have not read about this anywhere. I think I started to think about this with Anka a few months ago, and we were talking about it, and we came to this conclusion. Maybe that there is also a dormant necessity for us to struggle in life, and maybe it comes from the fact that as human beings we've been on this earth for millennia, in a place that is very unsafe, meaning that we had to watch out every second of the day for things that were going to kill us or eat us. Bears, snakes, you name it. Meaning that even the best of refuges, like 2,000 years ago, was still just some leaf on top of a rock. So I'm exaggerating, but I'm trying to make my point. So all of a sudden, society advances at a crazy speed. All of a sudden, the world becomes so much safer, but our collective consciousness has not advanced as much. So it's almost like we don't realize that it's okay. We don't realize that it's going to be fine. So we still have all these attachments to fear and all these things. And maybe, just maybe, that's why a lot of people that have so much comfort in their lives have depression, because it's almost like they can't find a sense of purpose if they can't struggle. A few of them even create their own problems. Like, everything is fine, but somehow, some way, they start a fight with somebody so they can resolve a fight. They make a big deal out of a tiny thing so that they can be upset about something, and then you know release frustration. And you start to wonder, like, oh, so these problems must be because this is somebody who's entitled. Yeah, I guess you could simplify it like that, but it also could be explained by the fact that all of us maybe have a dormant necessity of relevance, and all of us want to feel like we're doing something that is changing something, doing something that is progressing. I am here, I'm conquering, I'm building, I'm making, I'm a creator, and when we don't have the a purpose, we feel depressed. And that's why sometimes it's irrelevant the amount of money that you have or the amount of money that you make at a job, because if you have lost your sense of purpose, the reason why you exist, why you live, why you fight, why you struggle, then it's almost like, yeah, so then what am I doing all this for? So I don't know. And what you were saying earlier, I wrote this down too, about growing food. I don't know what's going to happen with society there, because I mean, this is also factual. People can look it up. When we were archaic and we had slaves, and that is archaic, and I'm not making an argument for slavery. Of course, that's bullshit. Um, there were people that their job was just to philosophize, just to do exactly what we're doing right now. Their job was just to paint. Their job is not, and it wasn't because they were getting paid exorbitant amount of money. At least not at the beginning. I'm sure it evolved to something a lot more complex, but it was because the basic labor of growing the fields, of taking care of the horses and all that stuff was done by slaves, so that the real currency became some sort of intellectual, uh, I guess you could call it intellectual power. And so the and not to say you could grab the most educated person from that time, put it now, and that person would be completely ignorant. Like but back then, that person would be the equivalent of a Dawkins, or you know what I mean. And you can, so maybe in the future, when we go into AI and complete automation, and we have all these things being taken care of by machines, we could have some sort of utopian system. And I'm saying possibly. I have no fucking clue. We could also just end up with a Skynet that kills us all. But and the reason I say that is because then in an economy that's automated, what would be the value behind somebody making, burgers? And I came from the restaurant industry, so I'm not trying to put it down. But my point is, if a machine can do it 10 times faster and cheaper, what would be the value of somebody that can do that now, and only do that? Now, here's the other element to it that it's worth discussing, which is what would happen to those people who don't have the capacity to learn a new job, a new career, who are never going to be big contributors of intellectual value. What would happen to them? Because we can't assume that every single person can just all of a sudden become a writer or a painter or a musician or have any contribution of that sort. Um, and that's when the discussion gets really muddy and nobody really has an answer, because we could come up with the system to where, no matter what, people are taken care of and they're not gonna die. But then we're also assuming that people that are contributing to that society, to that structure, are not going to be upset about freeloaders, which, like, Scaredy just mentioned it. Because eventually we would have that. If somebody, the only thing that can perform is a very basic job, like putting a bottle cap on a plastic bottle, what would be the value of that human being? And that's why the answer to this is not apparent. People need a purpose, or they die. And I mean by that is not just, I'm not saying that just physically, like they would actually kill themselves or anything like that, even though that's a possibility. But there's also living zombies. So it's an interesting to think about, and everything that we can discuss about this is complete speculation, because I have no fucking clue what's going to happen. And sometimes I feel hopeful for what could happen if we become a completely automated society, and sometimes it kind of scares me, to be honest with you.
I guess my main, like I'm looking at chat too, and I mean I see where Skitty Cat's saying basically not everybody can be an artist or something like that. And I don't necessarily disagree with, like that sentiment. And I guess my biggest problem is it feels like the way society is currently set up, the way the government operates, it's still based around gearing you to not follow your own passions and not follow your own, purpose or motivation. And it's basically dictating what you should do as opposed to what you like want to do. Now, obviously, we know not everybody's going to be a famous painter, not everybody's going to be a great author, not everybody's going to be, some massively successful philosopher or any of this kind of stuff. But if we look at it from the standpoint that you can still do what you enjoy and grow in those things while also not spending most of your life doing something you don't want to do. Like finding some kind of balance to where you can still be a productive member of society. And I hate that term, productive member of society.
Me too.
I feel like
Probably for the same
dictating.
reason.
Right, it's
Yeah.
it's it's about dictating people's value and basing it on it boils down to money again. I mean, I feel like if we ever lived or knew a time without money, that we'd probably have an entirely different perspective on people's value. So, like, I feel that whenever we get into that whole situation that we're in now, where society is basically you go to a school, which I view as essentially just a government indoctrination camp. I mean, they're going to teach you the most basic skills to do the most menial tasks, just like what you were talking about with slavery. Like the illusion, like I feel like whenever the Civil War happened, we got this great illusion that basically Abraham Lincoln went around freeing slaves. I look at it from a different mindset. Abraham Lincoln basically took money off the gold standard, and he's actually a lot of people probably don't actually know this part, but the Civil War is the first time when money stopped being worth anything. A lot of people think of, I want to say it was Roosevelt that took us off the gold standard, but if you actually look back to the Civil War, what happened is the northern states wanted to come and basically take back over the southern states because that's where all the agriculture and basically the north was mainly the factories and the industrialization, and one doesn't work without the other. So what happened
Yeah.
is the north states basically started getting paid in promissory notes. That's whenever money stopped actually having any value and was basically just based on the faith and trust of the United States government. And what happened is they used those notes to fund a war, and we basically have the situation now where people are under the impression that because people aren't out in fields getting whipped anymore and things like that, which I'm not saying that that's right. I'm saying that's obviously wrong. But we didn't free anyone. We just enslaved the rest of us by making us think that we freed people. So it's kind of like just all a big joke to me in the grand scheme of things that slavery doesn't exist anymore. I think slavery just has a lot of different names now, and I think people don't realize they're slaves.
I agree with that. Ron keeps on saying that the government really is a pyramid scheme. You know, and the way that it works is by making sure that we have more and more debt, more and more people coming into society, becoming cogs, like you were saying, earlier, because the only way it can sustain itself is by having growing the population, which is one of the reasons why maybe we have we don't really crack down on immigration because we don't want to.
Well,
Um,
why would we want to? I mean, it's basically the only way we can afford to get anything done.
well, yeah, exactly. That's the point. We couldn't if we did that, the country would be shooting itself in the foot. And there's a lot of stuff regarding immigration that gets removed from the table because it's convenient. Like a lot of people like to say, well, the freeloaders, the ones that come here and all this stuff. But if you actually dig into it, the illegals, and by the way, I'm not making an argument for illegal immigration or against. I'm just stating a fact. They pay so much into taxes that is ridiculous, and more than 80% of them don't reap any benefits. So yeah, there is a percentage of them that do get benefits, but More than 80% of them don't. So they'll pay into Social Security for years and years and years, and when they get old and they retire, they get nothing. So that's why we're not really cranking on it, because the government really. You think they don't know? Of course they know. I used to do hiring for 22 stores, and I used to submit all the paperwork, and there were times, I'm not allowed, but there were times where the paperwork that would come in looked completely fake, but I'm not allowed to say. I'm not allowed to say, hey, yeah, this green card you brought here is completely illegal. So I just have fill in the paperwork, and I would send it to the centers where they would do the vetting, make sure that it was legal, and 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 then it would come back, and they would work. And of course, all of a sudden the person would disappear 7 8 months later, but you were kind of doing all you had to do on your side. And some waves, what you're saying, they pay Social Security. They pay a ton of Social Security. I did a calculation, just because people that know me know I'm a little weird and I like numbers. I did a calculation, and the 22 stores that I used to hire for, on average, every single store had anywhere between 15 to 20 employees and these were McDonald's, by the way, that were illegal, and this is in Arizona, and all of them would pay anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 a year on to Social Security, working for McDonald's. So do the math, and none of them got any benefits from that. Of course, there's still those that work for cash, but that's a small percentage compared to all the ones that work in companies that hire them illegally. And yeah, you can look this up. But that's my point is just, again, going back to what Ron was saying. Like, there's always going to be a government, because there's always going to be a demand for it, and the government's always going to be corrupt because it's convenient to be corrupt, because it's a self-perpetuating meme. These people that are in power, that we keep on thinking, oh, the people behind the curtains and all this stuff, they are real. They're just not one particular person. It's more of a, what would be the right term to use here? I'm trying to think of the one that Jordan Peterson likes to use, because I think it'll be convenient but it's almost like the antithesis. Is that the word I'm looking for? It's more like there is, the people in power are not one person, but collectively they create a super organism that could be construed as one person, or as a few people, and they don't know the people that are in power, the people that have the power to change things, don't know that they contribute to this organism. So it's almost like, what this reminds me of. This reminds me of when you go into management at a store level, like, and how your brain starts to switch to become part of that cog, part of that collective, part of that organism. Because, like, let's say you start out at a company, right? And you start out at the very bottom, at the very beginning. There's you, the employee, and then there's the bosses, and you have these level of bosses. So it could be, first, of course, maybe the shift manager, whatever it's called in the company that you work for. Then it could be the the assistant manager, then the general manager, then the supervisors, all that stuff. So, but first you have the the shift manager. You start out, you look at them, they're the boss. You have the possibility one day to become a shift manager. But the way that you become a shift manager, and they'll tell you this, it's like, once you start acting like a shift manager and you learn the things you need to learn, you become one. And the key operational word here is start acting like. And start acting like is almost as if you were able to get the programming of the way that you're supposed to act, be able to start guarding this meme of what it means to run a company, what it means to be a leader within the company. And once you start emulating that, then you can be a shift manager. And then all of a sudden it'll become the new employees, and then there's you. And the gap, the distance, is defined by many things. Well, obviously not just pay structure. It has to do. There's almost like a tribalistic difference, and people are even told, don't be friends with your employees. And the gap keeps on becoming bigger and bigger as you go up in the chain. And I find it to be kind of comical too, because, like, I don't know how it happened with you, but like, when people, if you met somebody that was first an employee, and then you were able to extrapolate that whatever psychological profile that person had at that point in time, put that in a case. Not that you could, but let's just imagine. And then you grab the same person when that person becomes a manager 2 years from now, or a general manager, and grab that brain, put it somewhere else, and then analyze the two. They're two separate people.
I definitely agree with that, and I think that's part of the problem with politics too, is that it's based around. See, you know this too because from working in restaurants, just like what you're saying, there's levels to it, right? Like the higher level you go, the less you're supposed to really care about the people below you, but you're supposed to still give them the impression that everything you're doing is to their benefit. But it's
Exactly.
not. Like we know it's not. So whenever you know that you're basically screwing people over and using them, but you can't let them know that you know, and you can't let them know that that's what you're doing, because then obviously they're not going to work for you very well. It builds a whole system around manipulating people and essentially just trying to use people without. I think it's just like a covert system, it's based around how much you can get out of someone for how little you can give them in return. And like politics are the same way. It kind of like what Ron was saying with the whole pyramid scheme aspect. But just like you and I know from working in restaurants, at the top of the pyramid isn't the president or the head manager, it's the owner. And
Exactly.
rarely are those the same people because the owner is the person that just sits back and collects money without actually having any input whatsoever. And the way that you get to be the head of the pyramid is by basically being the biggest shark in the tank. Like, who can screw over the most people to get the largest returns for the least input? And this is how society basically works in capitalism. Like, it's just, it's not a long term means for success as a species. Like, you don't see animals operating like this. Like, you don't. Even like if you go out into the ocean, right? Like sharks don't try to eat as many fish as possible. They try to eat enough fish to stay full and let the fish keep reproducing and being successful. Whenever you look at a business, it doesn't operate like that. The business's goal is to eat every damn fish possible so that other businesses can't get to those fish and compete. And
Yeah,
that is true, sound waves. Sharks do not have Wi Fi.
that's true. I never thought about that until right now. Uh, but it's interesting that, and especially like speaking of restaurants, because you and me have experience there. Like, isn't it interesting though that the people that were when they were at the bottom, the ones that they were complaining about how unfair things were and how it wasn't really a meritocracy and all stuff, when they go up in position, they start acting the same way they criticized. I find that to be really funny, and I'm not saying funny, haha, like funny, kind of like ironically. And the other element that kind of always angered me, and the reason why I never want to go back to work in retail or restaurants, is because you almost, in order for you to succeed in that environment, if you want to have a career, if you want to really get up there and make the salary and go for that fake security we were talking about earlier, you really have to learn how to play the game. And the game is played with complete hypocrisy. Like every single time, and I'm saying because I've been in different positions. Like every single time you think somebody is acting as a stoic leader, it's only because you haven't seen that person interact around people that are above him, and then you will realize that he's a surrogate. So this is to say, like the last job I had, I was an assistant manager for a guitar center here in Florida. I never wanted to be a general manager. Not really, not anymore. I got burned out. But because it was a position to where I was good enough to make enough money and still have a little bit of a life, even though the second part didn't work out as well. But I didn't want to go up in the ranks ever again. Not too much anymore. And But one of the things that always I found it laughable was every time a supervisor would show up, all of a sudden people would know their roles, and all of a sudden people start acting. Um, and I'm using the word acting literally, and so I'm like, oh, supervisor's here. All right, so people that for that day they dress nice. If you speak with some sort of slang, you stop it. Like if you say, hey bro, what's up, that's it. That day you don't. um, then the supervisor or the owner, or it could be, it doesn't matter, whatever industry you want to do it in, will walk around and looking for problems, because of course they're there to see them, to point them out so that people can react and people can fix them. And they're going to delegate, and then the people they delegate to are going to delegate to the rest. And this comical act starts to happen to where they'll walk around. There'll be in this case assistant managers holding little notepads, and the owner or the supervisor would be like, well, you see this wall here? Well, this wall is green and it should actually be teal. And then they take notes down. Yeah, you're right. It should be teal. Yeah. The teal. Yeah, that's what we're going for. And then it will tell the next person, hey, didn't I say that this wall is not supposed to be green? It's supposed to be, yeah, you did say that, because the other person knows that to play the game properly, you have to pretend the machine is oiled and it's working properly. And then that person would tell one of the workers, hey, listen, like, don't worry about it. This is not your fault. Everything's gonna be fine. Once they leave, we'll take care of it. Oh, let's start taking care of it now. And this whole act starts to happen, and I find it comical because um, it's fake on top of fake on top of fake. This house of cards that we have built, and these structures within society are ridiculous, and everybody knows they're ridiculous. Yet we choose to play them. Yeah,
Look, I want to tie it back in to the theme here. 1 second.
we
But
went all over.
but watch. I just want to say first. We had some new people joined us. Just want to say hey to Activist Blog, Art Mess. I see Rebel Dan joined us. Avian Flu is here. Bimbo Maniac. Globo Cop joined us. So did Azaria. Fee came in a little while back. And looks like that's about everybody. Just to let you know, this is the second official episode of Coffee and Philosophy. The the loose theme is jealousy and envy, and I'm being joined here by MenO, who you've been hearing talking. Uh, okay, everything that you're talking about, this acting, this game that people play, this exactly ties back into the whole jealousy and envy thing, because it's all based, like, if you really follow it back to its core, it's based on greed. You know, why are you trying to impress this person that's technically superior in the chain, or above you? It's because you want what they have, right?
Yeah. This is
Like,
a way to tie it back in. It's true,
like that
100%.
that's the way the game works. To move up in this chain, you have to be more and more like the people that are higher up in the chain. But what I think we'll find is that the higher up the chain you go, the more. I really don't like labeling people as sociopaths, but I feel like the higher up those chains you go, in most situations, you're going to find a lot more sociopathic tendencies. You're going to
I
find
agree.
people that are much less empathic, but and really the job requires you to be less empathic. The job requires that you use people and lie to them. Like that's it's the unspoken rule that goes on in society. It's to me it's not sustainable. At some point, we see companies that don't do this, and we see like companies that are more altruistic and companies that actually provide and care for their commons. Because Rondon was saying that we're basically discussing the struggles of the commons, or however you want to word it. Basically, the people at the bottom get screwed, but they don't really have to. I mean, think about it. Like if we look at the way money works, just like with Steemit, like obviously money tends to just basically collect at the top, because I mean that's generally how capitalist societies work. And I'm not sitting here promoting communism or anything like that. But whenever money gets involved, obviously there is a collective of wealth that tends to happen the power positions, like however you want to look at it. But it's so beyond anything that one person needs, it just doesn't make sense. Even if you took 10% of the wealth that collects at the top and distributed it among the bottom 10% of the people, all it's going to do is feed back up the machine. Like that's the way the machine's designed. Even if you gave everybody 100K a year job, it's still just going to funnel up the top of the machine to where the people at the top of the machine are going to be sitting there with billions instead of millions. Like that is fundamentally how our society and capitalism works.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's just an observation that you're making, and I say it's not a negative thing because it's just an observation of what it seems to be human nature, which is certain people are better at accumulating resources than others, and maybe we can break it down to that. I think maybe one of the things, or one of the biggest challenges in order to be able to level the playing field, is to have some sort of shift in the way that people perceive poverty or the lack of resources. And so I was taking a little note down about this because um, and the reason why I say this is because many of the people that are trying to grow in personal growth, I'm talking about in that sense. Many people are trying to grow are usually blocked by people who are also trying to grow, that they believe that if that person grows, it's going to be a determinant to their own growth. And so it's almost like the commons, as you guys were referring to earlier, become the protectors of opportunities for the other commons. And maybe that comes from a mentality of scarcity, which is completely possible, from thinking that the resources are so limited because the people and the powers to be, the whole 11 cookies, and there's one cookie left, and they are the ones telling us, hey, don't let so and so take your cookie, while they hold 11.
Right. As long as people hoard resources, there's going to be scarcity mindset.
Exactly. So maybe it comes from there. But the other element to it that we tend to be blind is that we are the ones also protecting the people that are holding the most resources. Because when we are trying to level the playing field by trying to make a more just system, a more merit-based system, which is one of the ideas behind cryptocurrencies. Um, there's people within the ranks that are commoners right now who maybe consciously or not are working against those thoughts because they want to be the ones to hold the most amount of resources in the future. And so, you see what I mean? So it's almost like, no, I don't want the game to change because one day I'm going to be holding 11 cookies too. And I and they don't realize, maybe subconsciously, that they're doing that. And there's some sort of connection. And I don't know if you ever thought about this, Clay, but it's an interesting thing to think about because there's some sort of connection to poverty equating somebody who is morally corrupt, that most people, and I'm talking about the United States, I don't know about other countries, but I know here, most people make that connection, and they don't know that they do. And so in order to give poor people a sense of irrelevance, and at the same time, in order for people to trick themselves into thinking they're not poor, just so that they can keep on protecting these gates I'm talking about. So let me see if I can explain this better. So we think subconsciously, like I said, in society, that if somebody is poor, that person is poor because they deserve to be poor, meaning they made the wrong choices. They probably do drugs. They're probably lazy. We have all these ideas of preconceived notions, preconceived ideas of why they are poor, and we are quick to make this judgment. We're quick. Okay, somebody's living in the street. That person must be a piece of shit. Now, we don't know anything about that person, and it could be that that person got scammed. It could be that that person had an emotional breakdown. It could be so many reasons, but we make that judgment. Now, a lot of people don't realize that they are also poor, but they're quick to dehumanize other people, but they don't realize that they're also poor, and but yet they don't see themselves as poor. They see themselves as potential rich people, meaning that they go like, yeah, I may only live paycheck on my job, but I'm not poor. And one day if I work really hard and I pull myself up by the bootstraps, as they say, I'm gonna be up there, and I'm gonna be holding the 11 cookies. And you guys, you right there on the street, this dehumanized thing that that I don't recognize your humanity. I don't recognize anything about you besides the fact that you made the wrong choices and you suck. You are gonna be fighting for the one. Maybe this is completely subconscious. But then I become a guardian of the system because I don't want to be that guy. And I want to make sure that I one day have the possibility or the ability to be the hoarder of the cookies. So I become, like I said, I become my own worst enemy. And I think in America and the capitalist system that we currently have, it is somewhat that it is somewhat that the superorganism that we've become is defended by the white blood cells, and I'm not using white for anything racial. I'm just because that's how it works in the body. That um, are fighting change. Don't want the game to change, right? Because they believe that one day they will be sitting in a position of power. But they have not realized that the government, the way that the system is designed, it is currently operating, it's not working for them. You see what I mean? It's not.
Well, I think from what you're saying and how it can be subconscious, I think it can actually be conscious too. And I think the way I view it personally is whenever you're comparing yourself to others is the only time you're ever rich or poor, better or less, more or
I
less
agree.
than someone else. I think I think this is part of the whole dominator competitive society. Whenever you're trying to be more or have more than others, it's always going to be that way. But if you can step back from that and look at things from a collaborative society and you're not comparing yourself to other people, I think the only real competition that exists is the competition with ourselves. If we want to be more, if we want to do more, who, nobody's really stopping us other than ourselves. Like, obviously, there are hurdles to jump, and there are, systems in place that are stacked against us. But the only person stopping us from beating that system is ourselves. I mean, if we collectively shift away from competing against each other to competing against ourselves to be better than, everyone collectively moves up together, right?
I agreed, again, I think this comes from the. I hate using this word because it's such a cliche word now, but you have to really wake up to the reality that you know that you're guarding a system that's not working for your own benefit. And some people, I think that waking up to that is pretty painful, right? It's almost like, what do you mean? I've lived my whole life, believing in this system, believing that one day I can be up there, believing in the government's a good thing, believing that all the good guys versus the bad guys and all these things. What do you mean? Like I'm supposed to throw that in the garbage right now just because you say so? And so all these little ideas are just like seeds, right? And sometimes we throw them in the ground that is just rocks, and so people are completely not receptive to it. How do we
Well,
make? Yeah.
I mean, I think it's all part of balance. I mean, I think the system. I think if you look at the system and humanity as a whole, it's built to have both the people that empower and perpetuate the system of oppression, and it's built to have people like us that go against that grain and question it and essentially try to destroy it. Like, I don't look at what I'm doing as necessarily hostile towards the system, and I don't look at what the system is doing as necessarily hostile against me. I look at it as collectively, some of us want that, and collectively, some of us don't want that. Now, to ever find balance in the happy medium is going to obviously take some kind of drastic changes. Now, either those changes can take place in me personally, and I can find balance with the system and learn how to manipulate it and use it to my own benefit, which, I do. And other people, like, think about it like this. Some people manipulate the system to get on top of it. Some people manipulate the system to stay below it. And, like, I think of myself as staying below it. Like, if you look at my personal situation from, like, the stance of the US government, I'm impoverished, I'm poor, and I have no money. If you ask me, I'm doing pretty good for myself. now, who's right and who's wrong? I mean, it's all a matter of perspective.
Well, yeah, I guess I guess I'm exactly like you. Then I do the exact same thing. But I get my point was going back to what Ron was saying, which is the demand for. So like if we are supposed to one day become a society that has defeated rampant toxic capitalism and government, and I realize I'm being dramatic. What are we replacing that with? What's the system that is going to do it? Is it going to be a system? Is it going to be some sort of collective shift in the way that we perceive safety, in the way that we perceive wealth? That has to come first in order for us to be comfortable with with the idea of not requiring the governments that we currently have, with not requiring, oh, we need to have this much money invested into our military because if we don't, they're going to bomb us. That fear is real. It's fear to almost every single person in this country. We are not loved by the world, so I can talk about the benefit of of a altruistic society, of voluntarism, of all these utopian ideas that I particularly find beautiful. But if I have not been able to remove the fear from the collective, from the commoner, and I'm using that word again, not as insulting, I'm just to make a point. They're just ideas. We wouldn't be able to find a way to move forward on that unless we ninja our ways into making people think different.
Well, the most dangerous thing in the world is an idea, right?
But only if it becomes a meme. Oh, I'm serious, like that, because that's how most things have evolved. It was an idea that became a meme. And by the way, I'm using the word meme from the actual definition of meme. I'm not talking about demania. I'm talking about a meme. I'm talking about things that like things that you believe that are true, that you have no idea where it came from. Yeah, there you go. Typical bot.
Well, okay. Here's a way that we can look at how this system works, all right? We have the like just let's look at the US government for example, right? The US government's basically known around the world as like the oppressor country. We go and we basically pillage and take what we want from third world countries, and we'll fake news and make up bullshit. We'll justify ourselves, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if that's how we're viewed, let's think about where we come from. We come from a country that did the same exact thing, and basically we rebelled against it and started doing it ourselves. Like the Great Britain, the UK, whatever you want to call it, there used to not be anywhere that the sun set on the British Empire. They basically controlled the world. More or less, I mean, obviously in packets, but I mean, you still see the Union Jack like on the Australian flag and things like that. If we look at where we come from, we essentially are based around the idea that we wanted to destroy that system and get away from it. We wanted to exclude ourselves. We had this rebellion. We became our own country, and now we do the exact same things that they were doing to us before. So the
Yep.
system kind of perpetuates itself, even if the, I guess, like, you could say, even if the intentions are correct at the time, they can still get manipulated and basically distorted over time into perpetuating the same system that we already don't want. And that is part of the human condition, because greed is just, I don't know. I mean, I like to think that there's a way humans can overcome greed, and I want to believe that in the future greed is taken out of the equation. But, you know, how does that ever happen is what I want to know. Like, essentially, as long as anyone is greedy, it basically perpetuates other people to be greedy in return. Like, you don't beat greed by not being greedy yourself. So it's, I think we have to look at it as you just basically exclude yourself from the greed system. You just stop playing that game altogether.
That's true, but maybe we eliminate greed just by, I don't know if I'm gonna sound like I'm talking woo woo right now, but it's almost like we are elevating the consciousness of people, of the commoner, so that people, so that, so scarcity is not seen as a reality of, or the fear of scarcity does not overcome uh, people. Yeah, I don't. There was an exercise. I don't remember who told me this, but there's an exercise you can do. I guess, especially if you're feeling impoverished. It's kind of like it's almost like a shock therapy kind of deal. And the idea is that all of us, and it doesn't matter who you are, you could have thousands of dollars in a bank, and you still have this fear. You know, you said earlier, kind of jokingly, about how witnesses and all stuff. It doesn't matter. You can be making $1 million a year. You have this fear. Everybody has a fear of running out of resources, of becoming poor. And so there's a little exercise, I guess, that you do where you start to think about what would be the worst case scenario, like if everything went south. Like you go like, okay, so like imagine right now that this happens and all of a sudden I can't pay my home. I would have this many months to move out before blah blah, and you start going through the scenario of the absolute worst situation that could happen to you, and then you attempt to come up with, given the worst scenario, what would be the best thing you could do to, if not overcome it, if you can't, but to deal with it. And all of a sudden you realize, especially if you mind the right type of currency that I always talk about, which is social currency, that through your whole process you were considering only yourself, meaning that you were thinking, um, okay, so here's what I would run out of money. All of a sudden, the bank would come for my house. I wouldn't be able to pay it. All of a sudden, I would be living in the street. There's a park over here, and I'm being dramatic, I realize, but there's a park over here. I can sleep there, and there's this place. And for food, I can do this and that. You start going through this thing, and 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 of course, you don't say I die. Obviously, you're not being that dramatic. And but after you've done this horrible exercise, right, and that you've completely stripped yourself from everything that you currently have, you add to that equation, it's like, what do you think people will do, the people around you, the people that love you, your friends, if you were in that situation? Would you even having not even having to ask? And that's a key question, because I would present the possibility, and not to say that I know, that if maybe tomorrow I was to lose my house, I wouldn't be in the street, because there will be at least a friend that will give me a roof. And all of a sudden, this com- moment of extreme calamity um, starts to revert itself slowly, and you go like, you know what, yeah, maybe this could happen. Maybe if I do this, then maybe this person could give me a little job for a little while until I get myself back up. And of course, it's just a mental exercise. and you realize that this unsafe world, because we think it's so unsafe, everything's going to kill us, and it's not that unsafe anymore, because we don't, there's not a bear waiting outside for me to leave my cave after it collapsed to eat me. And there's not 1,000 mosquitoes with typhoid and all kinds of diseases out there. Well, mosquitoes don't have typhoid, but you know what I mean. That are going to kill me the moment I don't have a shelter. And there's not a human being that would look at my struggle within my circle, within my social circle, within my friends, within the people that I call family, the ones that are genetically related to me and the ones that are not, that would be okay with the idea of me dying of starvation if I just speak up, if I let them know what's happening to me. And once this whole process goes through your head, you stop feeling so poor. At least I do, because all of a sudden I go like, yeah, it is true. Like, there are months where I wonder what's gonna happen. I wonder if the car is gonna get paid this month, if something is like. But that comes from this idea, this greed that I have to fight back of thinking that I require so many things in my life to be happy, to exist, to continue. But I made up those rules. I made up this whole idea that I need to have, a brand new car. I made up the rule that I need to, you know what I mean, to eat in a restaurant once a week, a fancy restaurant. I made up these things. But when it comes down to real necessities, do I really live in scarcity? And maybe, just maybe, then that's a way to fight greed.
Right. I mean, I'm 100% in agreement that fighting greed is something that starts internally. I guess my biggest problem is you can't fight greed external to yourself. All you can do is be the change you want to see in the world, right? So if we collectively, like, let's say 10-20% of the population are collectively collaborative in nature and not competitive in nature, all we can do is really just keep perpetuating our own beliefs and keep trying to do things our own way and hope that over time the rest of the collective human species kind of like follows suit. I mean, the only way to really teach people a better way is to show them a better way, right? But whenever we're looking and our problems and our suffering in the US, like, just it doesn't really even compare to the rest of the world, right? Here our greed is basically around fighting a banking and interest system that the reason interest is really comical to me is because it's basically the creation of fake money that never exists. Like, I loan you $100 because you don't have $100, and I expect you to give me $120 back. Where did that $20 come from? You didn't even have the $100 in the first place. So whenever you give me that $120 back, I now have $20 that didn't exist and my original $100. And like the whole system is just based around that on a massive scale, ex infinitum. Apparently, if we look at the current economy, it's just astounding. But let's say we can get past all of that. But the problem is, like, we look at this and we consider this our suffering, but then there's parts of the world where, like look at some of our friends over in Nigeria, right? Like, they're literally gathering trash, trying to collect and recycle less than $1 worth of junk and things like that a day to be able to feed themselves. If they can't collectively, find enough stuff to sell, or whatever, find enough work to get the equivalent of $1 a day, then they literally have no means to feed themselves. So, like, if we look around the world at like other people's situations, it's comical to me, like how in the US we're so caught up on this one game and how we suffer from it. But the rest of the world, like, I mean, it really is life or death in a lot of other places.
And no exaggeration there. I,
Right.
I
Right. So like just like what you were saying where it's like I don't feel like and honestly, maybe that's something I take for granted in some respects is that like I don't personally feel like if I didn't have enough money that I'm under any real threat. You know, I feel like I could reach out to friends or I could find a homeless shelter. You know, like there are things I feel like I could do that if I absolutely had to, I'd be able to get by. But there are parts of the world where that's just not possible.
Yeah, is yeah. We complain a lot about this country, and aside from all the warts that it has, it is in that sense safe. Um, it's not the case in Venezuela, for example. You know, another country, and that's even closer. That it's not safe. You get people get killed in the street for a sandwich, and I'm not even trying to make a joke. That's a fact. But yeah. So I don't know. It comes to a matter of perspective, right? And I think that's why it's so important to try to pull yourself out of the situations and zoom out, you know, and kind of and really look in to what it is and eliminate as much as possible your own bias because um, we does it doesn't really even matter in what position you are in your life. It's really easy to lose the scope of reality. I'll share a story with you. It's kind of like a hilarious story to me, but hilarious because it's just you know I think it's kind of ironic, right? So my grandmother sent this is years ago, maybe like 8 years ago, sent some presents for somebody. My grandmother's best one of her best friends had a daughter who married this dude that had a ridiculous amount of money from Brazil. He the guy owns like 40 something different chains of restaurants and supermarkets and whatnot. So now the guy moved here to Florida, and I went to visit, and so the family because my I went to go see my grandma. My grandma lives in South America, and I came back with a present, and she was like, "Hey, here, take this for I can't remember her name. Let's say it was Claudia. Take this for Claudia. This is the address and all that stuff." Um, and so we went to the house to go deliver the present that my grandma, my brother, and I had sent. It was something she did, like a pillow she knitted or whatever, and it was in Fisher Island, right? The house. So just give you an idea. And we're in there, and I'm walking inside the house, and of course it's a ridiculous mansion. It's like completely ridiculous, and there's like giant paintings of God knows what the hell, and who's the people that signed it. There's a TV which is about the size, half the size of a bus on the wall, and and this lady, which is the mother of the the one that the president is for, is the mother of the actual owner of the house because the owner of the house is, you know, her daughter, and she's saying to us, and she was not trying to be ironic or cynical or clumsy. Really, she was just saying, "Oh my God, the situation is so rough right now in Brazil. You know, things have gone down so much," and that is possibly true. I mean, it is. Brazil has been going downhill for a while now. It's like, yeah, so now we're here, but we couldn't come with everything, and we're just, you know, with we just came with the minimal stuff so that we could be so that we could make it through. And I'm sitting there looking at the walls, going like, lady, I could sell this fucking painting and be set for 2 years. And here you are feeling poor, feeling like you're struggling. And but I know she wasn't saying it to make me feel bad. She wasn't saying it because she was trying to be comical or anything of the sort. It's like she felt scarcity and all the wealth that they had and all the things that they could buy. The fact that they couldn't buy a second yacht, I have no clue what the hell was going through their mind. They believed that was a sign of scarcity. So now I'm just putting this out there because obviously every single person in here has their own situation, and you might think to yourself some days, "Oh shit, how poor am I?" You know, and I include myself. I'm no enlightened guru, and think, "Oh shit, all these things, and look at me and all that stuff." But there's somebody out there, somebody in Nigeria, somebody in Venezuela, who would give their left nut, and I apologize for saying that, to have what you have. Yet, you feel poor.
Well, I really think scarcity only exists in that competitive mindset where we're comparing ourselves to other people. Like, I really don't think there's any way to have scarcity without that comparison. Because if you didn't have anyone to compare yourself to, and the life you live is the only life you know, and you're okay with the life you live, then how can you ever really know lack or want?
How could you ever know greed?
Right. So, I mean, I feel like and I use this term based on my perspective as an American person. Like I have never lived outside of the US. I feel like we are so caught up in this greed game of trying to get on top of the pyramid, which is really just all about fueling the pyramid itself, that we take for advantage the fact that a lot of the world has what I would consider comparatively real problems that they're still trying to overcome. And instead of, helping them and empowering them from a position of true wealth and, trying to raise the collective human race, we're going around taking their resources, and bombing them back into the Stone Age. Like this is how our country operates.
I find that to be so tragical because um, I feel kind of powerless to the whole situation. I was having a little conversation with Anka the other day, and I agree with her. I really like this idea, and I know that some people here feel really against the concept of voting. Um, but I think if we cannot eliminate um, voting, if we cannot eliminate the government, at least not in one go, because there's still demand, there's this idea that what if we could elect people by without knowing the names? Now, this is obviously completely utopian bullshit that is never going to occur. But imagine that if candidates for presidents, candidates for even just mayors, doesn't matter, would present their solutions, what it is that they're going to do, timeframes up to where when they're going to do it, and that people were hungry enough for knowledge and educated enough to make those decisions, so that you would select somebody that had the best platform instead of the name, instead of some sort of popularity contest, and then that person would have to adhere to set plans over a time frame, or the elections would be redone faster than they would have been. I like that idea, and I realize it's completely utopian. It's never going to happen. But and this is to say, because I don't really believe that the government in itself is evil. I believe that it's very much kind of like the corporations, to where the people learn how to play those roles, maybe fueled by greed, uh, and then once they learn how to play the role so that they can have more power in their life, more money, they know that perpetuating the pillars of the government, the things that they do, is for their convenience, so they can secure more resources and they can placate their greed, as there is as if that could ever happen. But maybe, just maybe, with this idea that we were discussing, this could be diffused.
Well, I think we got to start kind of wrapping up. We got about 6 minutes left, and Uni is going to be coming on with emotional integration, which is, I think, a great show to have either before or right after mine, because we maybe not so much this week, but some weeks we're going to probably be touching on a lot of the same kind of concepts. And I mean, I think greed is definitely tied into a lot of emotions, and I think that scarcity mindset does tie in too. So, right, I mean, we could go on all day talking about how all the things we want to change, and I mean that's one of the reasons why I wanted to definitely do a show with you, even if we might have been supposed to do it last week, but that was my fault. I
It's all good. I'm so glad we did it. You know,
yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
whenever you want to invite me, I'm more than happy to come.
for sure. Did anybody else have any more questions that we could try to go over quickly, or this is kind of like the format of the show, just for anybody that was just joining us this week. Basically, I'm going to have a guest come on, and we're going to discuss some topics. Obviously, with philosophy, it's kind of hard to tie down a specific topic because they go in so many directions. But just like with MenO today, I mean, we had a lot of great, conversation kind of branching off. And I mean, I really feel like this is how we be the change. I feel like talking about these issues, raising awareness, sharing perspective, these are all the ways that we actually can change the world. And I feel like if we spend too much time focusing on where we're at and how far we have to go, that we are essentially, kind of, it's really easy to feel overwhelmed and think that we can't accomplish anything. But in the grand scheme of things, I think we're moving along pretty nicely. I mean, look at where we were 100 years ago. I mean, women couldn't vote. It was illegal. It was essentially illegal to be gay. I mean, I think as a species, we're evolving, and we're gonna get there. We just have to, keep putting in the effort, keep talking about these issues, and keep raising awareness. What about you, Mina?
I'm all for it. I believe strongly in education, and I don't use the word as a in any traditional sense. I believe that it, just like you, that if change is to come, it comes with a shift in social consciousness, and a growth, development, and morphing of collective wisdom. And those are not just random words I'm throwing out there. It's just it is what it's supposed to be, which is that if enough people are wake up to these realities and enough people start questioning things and not just taking things because they were told that's the way they're supposed to work, that's the way they're supposed to be, uh, we are sure to keep on making progress, and then the best way possible, which is to level the playing field, uh, which is really what this whole thing is all about. This is not to say we will ever find a system that won't be flawed, or that people won't be able to abuse, or that human greed won't take over, because that's impossible. It's part of our nature. But what I believe can happen is that we can find the least worse, the best system, the one that uh, gets the closest to our ideals of meritocracy. But
Right.
that would only come if more people talk about this, if more people think about these things.
All right. I mean, I feel like it's all about balance. It's just we have to be respectful of opposition, and at the same time respect ourselves enough to not stop talking. Right. Even if we compromise and our own beliefs change over time, we got to realize that opposition can do the same thing. And I think it's just important to not get caught up on where you're at any given time, and just kind of keep a clear picture of where we're collectively going. So, thinking small scale, a couple of people talking doesn't mean everyone has to listen, but the more we talk and the more the conversation changes over time, the more people talking, the more people are going to be listening, obviously, right?
And the more the ideas will be polished, because maybe our ideas are too raw, but maybe they're building bricks for the ones that will make it through.
Right. That's something I've had to accept too. Like some of my ideas are like even I can accept that they're pretty radical by other people's definitions, but I mean that's something that teaches me to be respectful and listen to other people's opinions and what they have to say too. But I just want to thank everyone for joining us. We're going to be going off the air in about 15 seconds or so here. If you have the time, please stick around and join UniWIS for emotional integration, and we do appreciate all of you coming out. Thank you for joining us on Coffee and Philosophy.